important to know is that we live here, with the exception of Mara, who used to live in the area. And we love this community. This project is not just a job for us, it's really a labor of love. I think it's safe to say we're all going above and beyond the scope of work that we were given by the town to make sure this process and our document, our report really is beneficial to the community. So I want to thank our team. I'm not going to give detailed bios on us right now because we have a lot to cover, but we have a website. It's really a Google slideshow like this, but it's at bit.ly/Paonia Master Plan. You can access our bios there. Just briefly, my background is in community resilience. Rose has done some great municipal planning with cities around the West. Molly and Mara are really talented local architects and designers, and Scott, as you'll see tonight, is a great facilitator, among other things. And I also want to thank Jess Durbin-Ackerman, who's helping out with the registration, doing a great job out there, and then all of the facilitators we have tonight for the small group activities we're doing. We've got Steve Plissette, Ben Graves, Karen Tarnow, Annalie Foster, Jeremiah Garcia, Jake Carter, Sally Kane, and Karen Good. So thank you. I also want to thank Burke Harvest for the pizza. It's really hard to get pizza at 5 o'clock on a Thursday night in this town, I learned. That ended up being one of the hardest parts of making this event happen. And also thank you to Carol Sikora for these beautiful flowers. Let's see, and also, of course, thank you to the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees who are working on this project with us. There we go. So back to, we love Paonia. What do we love collectively about living in Paonia? This is the exercise that you all contributed to on your way in, or many of you. We did have a little bit of a glitch, so we'll see if it's working now. Oh, still? Huh. All right, I'm sorry guys, that didn't really work very well. We only got a handful of the responses that came through. Okay, well, I think most of us love our community, and that's why we're here tonight. Quick agenda overview. We've got this short presentation. Then we're going to do a visioning exercise about the future of Paonia, help get our creativity flowing. We're going to have 2 interactive community exercises, one around vision and values, and another around goals, policies, and actions. Then we'll do kind of a group harvest, a summary of key takeaways, and a brief closing. We don't have any breaks scheduled, so please take care of yourself. Use the bathroom down the hall, beverages, food as needed. We know there's the screening of Fern Gully across the street at 7, and some folks are needing and wanting to leave for that. You're welcome to do that. There will be a break between exercises around 6:50, which would probably be a good time, but just, take care of yourselves. Few group agreements, very simple agreements to help the evening run smoothly. Keep it respectful. Please be considerate in your communication. I have a kindergartner and I just keep thinking of that when I'm thinking of this group agreement, like modeling respectful, considerate communication. Please stay positive and constructive. This is not the time to be venting and airing your grievances. Those are important, and we have an email address. You can send us whatever feedback you want, but tonight is about thinking about the future together. And we also ask you to stay focused. We have a lot to get through. We don't want you to feel stressed about needing to get your point through tonight. If you feel like you haven't had the opportunity to share what you want to share, there are many ways to engage. By email at paoniamasterplan@gmail.com. You can email us anytime there. You can bring a letter to Town Hall. We're going to have another public engagement session on June 10th. We'll have a public review of the draft master plan in October, and then the Planning Commission will have a final hearing, a hearing on the final master plan probably next February before they can adopt it. So there will be many opportunities to engage in the process. And you're welcome to just leave us a sticky note tonight with whatever comment you want, even if you don't feel like it fits into one of the categories we have laid out. So again, kind of an overview of how this process works. We've started by reviewing and analyzing about 2,000 pages worth of existing materials. We're not starting from scratch. There's a big foundation of work that's already been done over the last 25 years plus since the last Paonia master plan was completed. But tonight and then our next community engagement session on June 10th, those are good times to bring your big ideas forward and or submit them by email. Once we get to the point of having a draft master plan, then we'll be looking for more specific feedback on kind of what's already been laid out based on all the research and all the information we've gotten from the public. So now's the time for big ideas. Later in the process is more specific feedback. What is the master plan? What's the role and goals? It's a long-range guiding document for a community to achieve its vision and goals. That guiding document piece is important. It's not policy, it's not binding, but it is a framework for policy and regulatory tools. It promotes the community's vision, goals, objectives, establishes a process for orderly growth and development, and addresses current and long-term needs, balancing natural and built environment. That piece around long-term needs, I just want to say I'm really happy to see a few kiddos here tonight, because your future is part of this. The American Planning Association sets the my partner is smiling at me, rubbing my pregnant belly as I say that. The American Planning Association sets the standards for master plans, and they describe master planning really as how to sustain the place where we live. And it should be a dynamic, democratic process, again, thinking about how to meet the needs of current and future generations without compromising, this time, the ecosystems on which we depend. So given all that, our goals for this process are to, first of all, develop a shared vision and a clear, accessible action plan to guide our community toward a thriving and resilient future. It's going to be a pretty short document, 30 to 40 pages is what the town requested. They want something that's really useful. It's not just going to sit on a shelf. People can read it. And then we also really want to build the energy and momentum to bring that plan to life. So our second goal is to utilize a participatory community engagement process, starting with this event tonight, that builds trust in local government as well as momentum toward addressing our community needs and goals. Really briefly, so you know what to expect in the final master plan. I just think the idea of master plan can be a little abstract, so this is why I'm trying to break it down so you really know what we're doing together. It's going to have a brief history of Paonia, a community vision and values, which we'll be speaking about tonight, goals and policies, and an action plan that address 6 main topics: culture and character, recreation and tourism, economic development, water and infrastructure, land use and housing, which is also known as the growth framework, and then risks, resilience, and emergency preparedness. So those 6 topics are the different tables that you see around the room, and those are the groups that we'll be breaking out into tonight. In this plan, we're thinking about how to build resilience and thrive in the long term, around 30 years, so thinking 2050. But we're focusing on creating an action plan that will get us through the next 5 to 10 years and set us up for that long-term resilience. A bit more context. The Paonia growth forecast from the State Demographer's Office shows an estimated population in 2050 of 1,531 to 1,685. This is just based on past growth, and it doesn't take into account plans for how we want to develop. It doesn't take into account kind of new trends around urban-rural migration. It doesn't take into account water. That's just based on past growth. So with that, we're looking at about an additional 200 town residents by 2050. And we know that a lot of folks who consider Paonia their home and their community don't live within the town limits. They live in Delta County, and we're looking at a 17% growth projected for Delta County, again from the State Demographer's Office. And of course we know water is a limiting factor to growth. These are just some context for you to think about when we're diving into our topics tonight. Constraints on what we can do in our town and with our master plan. Again, we have the water moratorium. Everything we want to do is influenced and limited by the town capacity, staffing, resources, and budget. Zoning and code, some of which may need to be changed to reflect the will of the people. Social dynamics, how we're able to work together as a community and then as the people and government together. And then natural hazards, a lot of these will be addressed in the risks, resilience, and emergency preparedness section, but things like drought, wildfire, etc. And finally, a few basic assumptions we're operating on, just so you know what our baseline is for this. Again, we're not starting from scratch. And as members of the community and having done all this research, we know our community values its rural and agricultural aesthetic and character. We know our community wants to prioritize maintenance of essential infrastructure and services, which includes water, wastewater, streets, sidewalks, public trees, and facilities. We know economic diversity is important. We don't want to rely too heavily on just one industry. And of course, water is key. Water keeps coming up. We're definitely not going to go through all of these materials, but I just wanted you to know what we've been working with. And if you want to see this list more carefully, it's again on our website, that bit.ly/Paonia Master Plan. We'll keep adding links so you can actually access all the documents through here. But if there's something you want to read and it's not linked yet, you can email us, paoniamasterplan@gmail.com, and I'll make sure you get the link that you need. So we've got, like I said, about 2,000 pages of materials we're working with. And this on the bottom here is that video that was playing, made in 2014 by the Heart and Soul Project, which did a lot of work on shared values for our community. It's really beautiful. If you want to watch it and actually hear the dialogue, you can access it through our website. And one last thing we're building on, the town last summer did a strategy session to identify priorities. It had about 55 participants, and some of the key topics that came up, probably not a surprise, but housing, infrastructure maintenance, climate change plan, reducing polarization, bias, and conflict. So that is all I have for you. We're going to get to the fun part of the event. Thank you so much for bearing with me. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Scott. Did I forget anything important? Okay. We're going to just leave that slide up for a minute. Is that okay?
Yeah, this could come off eventually.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about the next two exercises that we're going to do. And the first one Molly is going to lead us in, which is a visioning exercise. And we'll stay together for that. But I want to talk about what comes after so that we can flow right into that after Molly's done. And each of the topic areas has a space around the room. So we're going to want your input in that next exercise on vision and values. So there will be a sheet. For example, here we've got land use and housing. There will be a blank poster sheet that just says vision. And so we want your comments using sticky notes right there on the sheet. So with vision, that could be a complete vision statement if you can fit it on a sticky note. It could be a word, it could be a phrase, whatever kind of comment you want to make on vision. And it's pretty much the same with values, except we have listed a few that we've gleaned from the research. So we would like your comments on those values, as well as any additional ones that you want to add. and any other comments related to values on sticky notes on the sheets. And those values that we've included are numbered, so it can be useful if you're commenting on a specific value to put the number on there, because sticky notes fall off. There is tape and there is glue, but it'll just help us keep it organized and, just kind of put them in the right place. And the values may be different at the different topic areas, because for each topic area, we'd like you to focus your comments on that topic. So vision related to housing and land use here, and then values related to land use and housing here. One other thing with the values, at each table, you get one sticky dot. And that goes by the value that you feel the most strongly about, that you resonate the most with, that you feel is the most important. So that just gives us a little bit of a way to rank things. So 1 dot per topic related to value. Let's try to keep the stickers on sheets of paper. So if what's there gets filled up, let's just stick another piece of paper on the wall. Supplies are on the tables. There will be 2 people at each station supporting the process. Let me see if there's anything I'm forgetting. So in terms of the flow, 25 minutes to float around the room and give us as much input as you can. It may be hard to get to all the topics in such a short time. You may need to prioritize. Remember, there's other ways to give us input. Marissa covered it. After 25 minutes, I'm going to call time and ask you to settle in at one of the areas, because one of the people there supporting the process is going to facilitate kind of a harvesting of what's been presented. Like, what are the takeaways? What are the areas of agreement or disagreement? And there's only 15 minutes for that. So please pick an area as quickly as you can. Once I call timeout, I'll do the timekeeping. They're going to try to get as many voices heard as possible in those short 15 minutes. So we'll ask that people raise hands, speak one at a time, and just give one comment at a time so that as many people as possible can be heard. And let's see, I think that's it. And if you still have questions, once that exercise starts, you can catch me, you can ask any of the people that are supporting the process at the tables, but we want to flow right from Molly's exercise into that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Molly.
Thank you everyone for coming. It's so awesome to see everyone here. So we're going to start with a little writing exercise. Does anybody need a piece of paper or a pen? It's brief, you don't have to share it with us. You can write this in your phone even. Get ready to write it in.
I think she's got 2. Anybody else need paper?
Okay. Anybody else? Everyone good? Okay. Sorry about that. I'll wait for everyone to kind of settle down again. Sorry about that. We'll gather again. So, can I have everyone's attention? Great, thanks. So, this next phase is actually a personal visioning exercise. So, we're just going to take a few minutes, and I want you to imagine yourself in 5 years or in 10 years in Paonia. And if that's a challenge, imagine the kids here in the room and imagine the Paonia you would wish for them. So, a day in your life. What does Paonia look like? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. So I'm gonna give you guys about 5 minutes to work on that. All
right, I'll ask you guys to kind of wrap that up.
We're not gonna collect those, but you're welcome to share them with us if you like. Mainly, we just kind of wanted to generate some creative energy and thinking about our futures. And I think as we move forward this evening, just remembering all of us have a beautiful vision of Paonia in the future. And we might have some differences, but there's going to be a lot of overlap as well. And I think that's what we want to focus on here tonight. So thank you all for doing that exercise. I'll turn it over to Scott.
And now we'll move into the other one. So 25 minutes to just move around the room. The folks facilitating will get those sheets on the wall. And if you have any questions, let me know or ask someone at one of the groups.
I was surprised to see this one, economic diversity and resilience, didn't get a whole lot of support. Related to this one, I think, is the issue of tourism, and there appear to be mixed feelings about whether or not to prioritize tourism as an economic driver, and like what we mean by tourism and what kind of tourism we want to attract. Some other values that were suggested, and some of these were presented more as goals and policies, and then as a group we worked to like refine them into values. Meeting local needs, like access to goods and services, prioritizing that. Community-owned, co-op businesses, public banks, participatory budgeting, basically all aspects of a democratic economy. The town doing what they can to support local businesses, including taking care of basic services to support those businesses. There were a number of kind of goals, policies, and actions, like, oh, looks like we did lose some, even though we've been gluing them on, but watershed, fiber shed, food shed, hemp, farmers market, regenerative, non-extractive, sustainability, all of these kind of falling under sustainable, regenerative, and resilient economy. Fair and equal opportunity to prosper, and community process and transparency around what type of new businesses are opening, particularly regarding any like chains or more controversial industry. And then one that's more specifically a goal and policy is support for light manufacturing and zoning to support that. Did you want to add anything, Sarah?
No, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, we're still kind of sorting through all of our stickies over here, but that's the gist of it.
Thank you for the
Yeah,
initial
thanks.
process. All right, let's go back to Jake. And risks, resilience, and emergency preparedness.
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult one to put a sticky note to. But we did come up with some interesting things. We had the most dots around number 4, value of nature-based solutions and green infrastructure, followed by public and private efforts to identify and address critical factors for food, energy, water. We had, as far as sticky notes around visions, really the big themes were around water availability and reliability, wildfire protection, and watershed resilience as part of really the resiliency piece of that. There was quite a bit around education, just in general, education of, for all ages around risk awareness. And then, what else do we have there related to education? Yeah, I think I'll just leave that. We're still kind of working on that one. But another thing that came up, a lot of folks brought up just planning and kind of a risk assessment of what is out there, what are the things we're concerned about, and then an emergency response plan. And someone noted also that the county and state are updating their hazard plans now. And then as far as policies, there was a couple things around the risk assessment. There's a need to a policy to do a formal risk assessment to identify priority risks, how to address them, followed by then setting up an emergency plan of what if something terrible does happen, how do we deal with that? And I had here, wildfire and watershed resiliency planning and the source water protection plan, as far as policies and actions that would go into risk assessment. I think those are the big ones. Okay.
Thank you. All right, and then back over here, let's do land use and housing. Are you ready?
Well, I'll probably echo that we have a lot of stickies to sort through. So actually, I'm going to put this back up. Do you want to throw that up there? Thank you. So, we had a pretty strong top value, which is preservation of open space, agricultural land, and rural character. And where I think we saw some of the vision and policy that starts to tie into that is in walkability, not a strong desire for density, and also limiting sprawl outside of the town. Not a big fan of subdivisions. And mainly, I think most of the town wants to see the size stay mostly the same. And so I think how we manage that with down at the next one, number 3, is how we manage to maintain affordable housing options, because that's also clearly an issue and has one person identified as a crisis, probably a crisis in a lot of communities, but that we need to put an emphasis on that, but we are limited by water, of course, and supply and demand. So I think one thing that maybe didn't find resolution through this conversation, but is how we do start to create some policies that can provide some affordable options while we're still dealing with the natural supply and demand that's happening here caused by the water infrastructure. And I'll go back to some of our comments here. But there's also some conversation around where should we focus commercial or industrial businesses, and the comments that came back were primarily Grand, out third to Samuel Way Road, but generally kind of pulling away from the residential core and keeping the residential core with the same walkability and kind of having some division there. Those were kind of our main topics. Am I missing any?
Not that I can think of.
Just what's sustainable about like how
And
we're
sustainable, yeah, and then also an importance of focusing on housing that is sustainable, water resilient, natural building materials. So those are the ones that came out.
right. Okay, I'm gonna go back across the room to culture and character.
Okay, so this was not a very hot topic. It's kind of interesting because when we did Heart and Soul, this was a huge topic that just kind of flowed through. We didn't really harvest around the table like some of the other hotter topics. But we've managed to ask people to put up their feedback, and then we sort of looked at what kind of themes and patterns seem to be emerging from that. Look, a few of the themes, a big one with culture and character was folks wanting to make sure we are preserving our watershed, food shed, a small town feel, night sky, all the things that kind of make it a quaint small town. Really interesting to see that the dots, the one that was most popular was the value of rural and natural environment opportunities for quality food, recreation, connection to the land. That won by a landslide on the dots. There was only one dot by heritage and history. And then the second one was community resources that interestingly are a lot of them are recreation, land, and agriculture based as well, that people were putting on the sticky notes. And then something that bubbled up in all of it was affordable housing, a particular favorite of mine, to be a real authentic town, meaning we have a butcher, a baker, and a candlestick maker, and they can all afford to live here. So those were kind of the main things. On the goals, policies, actions, what it really seemed like for us was, and for the folks who came through here, really prioritizing communication, the quality of it, communication between and among people, communication between the people who live in the town and the town government. Under the hurdles part, the tone and tenor of the town meetings, and a perceived leadership vacuum going on in the town for quite a while were things that came up here. And opportunities being around partnerships and forming groups that work on that communication and cross-pollinate ideas. The creative corridor, Carbondale, Salida, Ridgeway, Crested Butte, being more of a part of a regional effort was viewed as another opportunity. And then, of course, not surprisingly, hurdles being addressed came back around to vision and communication. So there was quite a bit of talk about just, it's demoralizing that we're not communicating better. And lots of stuff in here about keeping this town kind of funky, weird. Keep it weird was another. No box stores, just the sort of the flavor of a small town that's unusual that people were picking up on. That's what we gleaned.
Thank you. Okay, tourism and recreation.
What did that one mean? Karen's gonna start us off.
So, on our values, by far, the one that got the most dots was recreational amenities that are prioritized for needs of locals over attracting tourists. And second was art history and heritage, farms and orchards, so a lot of synergy with some of the other topics here. The conversation related to this value of, somebody, I think, said it really well. If we do things for ourselves because we want a healthy community, if that attracts tourists, great. But if we do things to attract tourists for tourists' sake, we may not like what happens to our community. There was some talk about how there are a lot of recreational opportunities around. They abound. They surround us. A lot of public lands, things that are basically free and given to us. So we're blessed by that. But The biggest area of comment on what we need in this town are safe streets, bike paths, skate parks, recreational facilities for the youth, by far. You know, other things covered the gamut from, you know, farm to table, art, just a whole lot of amenities that we have and that we cherish. And also the discussion even moved as we went into exercise number 2 into the sort of the yin and yang of doing things for the community versus tourists, and how do you strike the right balance?
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'll pick up the goals, priorities, and actions. You know, the one piece of those actions was about to tie onto this yin and yang, that kind of the stop waiting for grants mindset, because that is a game, and that there are other ways to achieve some of these, you know, goals in terms of recreational infrastructure through taxes, short-term lodging tax, or development taxes. But that brought up the issue of, like, if our town can't add water taps, then we can't have development, and that's how other towns pay for recreation infrastructure, is through development taxes and credits that developers, you know, use. So there's ideas around, you know, prioritizing easements so that, you know, the town can promote connectivity, and finding ways to incentivize landowners or developers to create that connectivity or to have that part of their of the way they develop. There was definitely some action items around the teen center, and utilizing town resources that are already here, updating the skate park, you know, really focusing on that childhood recreation. But yeah, there was a lot of kind of stuck policy around this yin and yang of tourist dollars can directly fund infrastructure, and yet if our value is to prioritize the needs of locals, how do we get those dollars, the tax dollars essentially, to fund that? And it really seems conflicting because, you know, a sales tax or some other tax, you know, property taxes, these are things that then hurt locals, but they also benefit locals in terms of creating new infrastructure and paying for the infrastructure. So there was a lot of conflict on how do we achieve that without also adding to the other problems like affordable housing issues and taxes and stuff like that.
Interesting. It sounds like similar to the housing and development, that we don't want sprawl, but we don't want density. So, you know, there's some,
And we want
push and
Yeah.
pull in
Yeah.
these decisions.
Wouldn't a short-term rental tax accomplish both of those?
Yeah.
things?
I mean, I'm surprised that that didn't come out of this,
Yeah.
sorry to butt in, but to not hear that come out of that table when that's the conversation that I was hearing many people talk about when I was around that table is upsetting. Because
The scale
what,
just might be way off.
Yeah.
The scale just might be way, I'm not against that, but it might not be the scale. to
Also,
really
just,
accomplish
if
that.
the facilitator didn't choose to bring it up, you know, that doesn't mean it's not represented.
Yeah.
And if it was written down, it will be captured and noted in the process. So, I think this is, again, it's just an initial conversation. We'll have a second dialogue, and then there will be several months for public comment, again and again. So, I really appreciate your enthusiasm, and I know I really love your thoughts. And also, like, I just know that everything is being recorded. We're gonna continue to take public comment. It's gonna, this plan isn't finalized till February, so.
I didn't hear what the gentleman in the Leaf Butcher started the conversation with. What was the
I just said, we were saying that taxes would harm locals, but if we put a short-term, like a tax
Short-term
on short-term rentals, we would then have more affordable housing available, and we'd be getting a tax, and we could just make it really extravagant. We could have like the most that any city has done in Colorado, which we really want those houses back.
Airbnb was written on the land use and housing sheet.
Make it a 30% tax.
Yeah.
I will say that there's like conflicting ideas about ADUs and density, and so I think that it is written there, and then there are other things that are written against it, and so I think we just have a lot of ways that we can start to look at ADUs. I know the town already has been looking at some different options there.
Well,
So
but it's
these
nice
are
though, so what I love
short-term
about this
rentals.
conversation, just to kind of bring it back, is that what we can do now is we can see the values, and now we can start digging into how we get there, right? And I think that that's where the conversation gets super generative, because there's lots of ideas, and what the master plan, the idea is not to choose which policy. It's to say, here's what we value, and let's get these conversations going, so that when we finish the master plan, there's someone, you can point to that and say, the master plan says we value these things, and here's some ideas for how we wanna do it. So we're not gonna necessarily come out of the master plan saying like, this is the exact Airbnb tax we should have, though that would be a secondary thing, knowing that we have these values. And what's so interesting about this conversation is that we're gonna have a chance to really dive into these hot spots following this up. But I wanna get to water, because they're our last share.
Keller Rose, before we go to water, I'm sorry, I just want to mention the affordable housing work that's happening because I neglected to do that in my initial presentation. So like a complementary process that's happening right now is that the town received a grant from DOLA to do an affordable housing needs assessment and action plan, and one of the things they're specifically going to be focusing on is how to address short-term rentals in a good way. So there's a whole big piece of work happening around that. They're starting their process May 1st, so really soon, and there will be community input and meetings for that as well. And we're going to be working together. We're already in contact with those consultants, so it's kind of nested within the master plan, but it's getting a lot of its own attention because housing and short-term rentals are such a challenge for us right now.
Right, and Marissa's going to talk to you about that. Okay, water.
All right, so obviously water is a big subject too. Some of the overarching vision and values that came up many times, we kind of moved the post-its and grouped them together so you can kind of see what the themes are. Ecosystem health, watershed resiliency, wetlands restoration was a big one. Beavers and climate resiliency was another big part of that, or like beaver analogs to help keep water on the land and help recharge our aquifers was big. Communication and community engagement was a common theme. And then some other smaller ones that came up were like a recycling and compost program, taking care of their green infrastructure in town, maintaining the trees and that kind of thing. And so some of the policies and things that we talked about coming out of that, well, another thing that came up that pertains to water, but it's kind of addressed, it really is more of a broader topic, is increasing representation for people that live outside of town on town council. And that came up a couple of times in here, and allowing those folks that are affected by town policies and that contribute with town taxes to have more of a say and an influence on said policies. So one of the things in regards to green infrastructure was coming up with a public tree care program that would help homeowners maintain the trees in town. It's expensive, but it's also imperative to, well, it affects our water resiliency here, the temperature that we all live with, et cetera, et cetera. Another thing was alternative materials for sidewalks. Concrete is exceptionally expensive right now, and there are other options to dealing with that issue that we have here in town. And then another thing that was definitely a popular subject was addressing sustainable growth after the moratorium lifts, and having a long-term assessment for our water supply and how we grow in conjunction with that. So, did I miss anything?
Just there's the interest and need to update our source water protection plan so that when we look at watershed resiliency and we go talk to the Forest Service about that resource that we share, the town has a very clear vision of what it thinks are important things to protect. Like, as an example, the Forest Service, when they think about the town of Paonia's water infrastructure, they only think of the hard infrastructure and not necessarily the infiltration galleries, the natural green infrastructure that our source water depends on being healthy. So, yeah.
And that, again, communication was a big thing. Just like informing people about where we are in terms of the infrastructure and watershed restoration projects, and getting that, educating the public on these things was definitely a popular item.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, like as the town goes and gets, you know, somewhere like a $40 million state revolving loan, just that the community knows where those dollars are being spent and where we're at in progress, in the process, and the town's not gonna go and ask for 40 million all at once. It's gonna be in phases. So yeah, I think the town just needs to really communicate that to people, so when the rates get adjusted, you know where the money's going. It's not just disappearing. It's not just disintegrating.
Can you tell people about the Citizen Water Board, so if folks want to come?
Yeah, sure. The last Wednesday of the month at 5 o'clock. It's a hit or miss if we have an agenda, but it's a great place to have a discussion and ask questions and raise issues and just learn about the plan and the progress. So if you want like a presentation on where are our critical aquifers and what our headwaters look like, I can show you plenty of maps. Sorry, the water treatment plant's calling me, but don't worry. I've been checking on it. That's fine.
Where does that meeting happen?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. It's right here. Right in here. Yeah.
Here at 5 o'clock.
Yep.
All right, thank you all so much for your harvests. Thanks for coming. Thanks for participating. I'm going to hand it back to Melissa to close us up.
Yeah, thank you all. We're so grateful that you all came. Great turnout, especially on a beautiful night like tonight. As our appreciation, we're going to let you out a few minutes early. I think one of our big problems tonight was just being able to access the walls because there were so many people in the space. That was a good problem to have. And yes, we'll continue sorting through, and there will be another session where you can bring your comments forward. I want to give a hand to our facilitators. I feel like they worked really hard. Thank you. And reminder, if you're volunteering, feel free to take home a vase of flowers as a gift. Thank you. Trustee Markle asked us to mention there's an opening on the Board of Trustees right now, and I think the deadline to apply is May 5th. I
think it's
correct? So coming up fast, and you need to be you want to explain that?
Yeah, sure. Actually, real quick, if you live in town, could you raise your hand real quick? And if you live in town for over a year, keep your hand up. Okay, you people are eligible to be town trustees. Since you started out this long,
yes, right?
For this meeting, you can do a lot more town stuff, but you obviously have interest in what happens in town. You may, if you were selected to be a trustee, determine how all of this pans out. So if it's something that you'd like to participate in, and you have a very strong character, but you put an application. There's a link on the town website to put an application in. It's just a letter of interest, really. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we really appreciate anybody who wants to volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you. Strong character and a good meditation practice.
Right.
Thank you. And we really appreciate all the work that y'all are doing too, as, in my mind, volunteers. You're volunteers too. Working really hard. So our next steps after tonight, we're going to review and synthesize all of this information and come up with more refined questions for the next session on June 10th. We've already heard some kind of the key conflicts and tensions we need to dig into to get clear on what the options are for solutions. We'll also be working more on our shared vision at that next session in June. We originally thought we were going to really focus on vision tonight, but we wanted to hear a bit from you all first before we craft that together. Again, you can contribute your comments via email, paoniamasterplan@gmail.com. Again, that affordable housing work is all going to be happening over the next few months as well. There was a place where you could provide your email address on our sign-in sheet. If you did that, or if you want to, I can let you know when we have updates on the affordable housing process and when their sessions will be as well. Otherwise, I'm sure you'll be able to find it on the town website, and there should be flyers and things like that as well. Okay, I think that's all that I have for you. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful night.